Thank you, Mark. Get set. It's time for the Addict II Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Blu Robinson here. I want to thank you all so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. Greatly appreciate you guys doing so. As always, keep an eye on that website, addicttoathlete.org. We have to say it that way because the new AI stuff that I guess the Apple platform puts out there leads you to a different website if I say it the other way. So, Addict II Athlete, and it'll get you to all of our backlog podcast information about the team, how to become a certified Addict II Athlete recovery coach, and so much more. Hey, everybody, I want to thank you all so much for everything that's been going down this year, September 2024, for National Recovery Month. Addict II Athlete's been a part of some amazing experiences. We just got back from St. George, Utah, where we were able to assist in hosting a 5K for recovery. And I want to thank Coach Judy down there in southern Utah for all the work that she's putting in. Man, she is doing some awesome work down there with the recovery communities. Thank you so much, Coach Judy, for all that you're doing. And thank you for everyone that showed up to show support through the proxy run that the Addict II Athlete was able to be a part of down there. As always, I want to thank everybody again for all that you do to be able to spread this message of recovery, hope, change, and erasing and replacing by being part of the Addict II Athlete family. Very shortly, I'd like to inform all of you that we are launching a new Circles application. It's a program and platform that will allow us to communicate directly with all of you out there, no matter where you're from, and get us away from some of the social media platforms. Although we'll still be posting on there, this direct link will be able to connect us to, I think, a lot better, a lot quicker, a lot more focused. For anyone that's tried to get away from social media, they've kind of struggled keeping in touch with Addict II Athlete. And so this is going to definitely help us all communicate, grow the team, and be able to get very hyper-focused on concepts, applications, content, the playbook for Addict II Athlete and you out there who are needing a little bit more support without all of the goofiness that sometimes social media brings. So stay tuned as we launch our Circles application, and I look forward to getting everyone on that platform and really let the recovery begin. Athletes, today it's a solo mission. Coach Blu here in the studio, and I'm going to talk a lot today about the concepts of a sister program that Addict II Athlete has been a part of, I think, almost from the inception of Team Addict II Athlete in and of itself. And that is our sister program, Addict II Artist. And I'm very excited to kickstart this program again. And I say again because we've had several opportunities to launch Addict II Artist. And we've had some struggles, specifically with time and space and individuals that could come and be a part of it. But now's the time. Just a couple weeks ago, my daughter Brooklyn and I were able to participate in an art experience. It was called Chalk the Block here in Provo, Utah. And the concept was to bring your skills and your artistry over to a location in Provo, Utah. It's an outdoor shopping mall called the Riverwoods Plaza. And they section a big part of this off, and you literally chalk the block, meaning you get down on your hands and knees and you use chalk and acrylics and things of that nature to create art, in the public space. And that experience kind of reignited the passion that I have for art and for, I guess, bringing some of the things that I hold kind of, to myself, some talents that I have that I don't like talking about a lot, back up to the forefront of my own experience. And what I mean by that is growing up in my life, as many of you know, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that I had a very tumultuous childhood, from a lot of divorces and marriages that my mother was a part of, to the poverty we experienced, to the multiple moves. I mean, you start looking at 22 moves in 18 years of life, you start realizing that's kind of the grounds for addiction to breed and to thrive in. And one thing that was consistent and constant with me was my ability to draw and to use that as an escape. And I did it quite a bit, and I still do it to this day. And it's one of these talents I kind of suppress and kind of hide from a lot of people. And I think part of it is because I still have that idea, that notion that I'm going to be judged off of my perception of what I think is good art. And it's funny because I am by no means a master artist. There's no way. But I do kind of hold my own, and I can do quite a bit. And a lot of mine was imaginary. It was more of the cartoons. It was more of the some landscapes and some dream type ideas. But I really found drawing and using art as an escape years ago when I was very young. And a lot of people said, hey, if you practice, you can become great at it and blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter was, I didn't show a lot of people. And I still have that tendency. And when we started Addict to Athlete years and years ago, we got to the point where we actually had an art show, and it was in company with the Utah County Health Department and the artist movement that they do every month down there, where they switch out all these photos and art in the public building for people to come in and watch and display. And it was awesome because for the first time, they wanted Addict to Artist to be a big part of this. And I was stoked. And it opened my eyes to a lot of what I didn't realize I was hiding from, which reflects the exact nature of what addiction and mental health concerns do to us. And so you got to bear with me, because remember, traditionally, until Addict to Athlete began in 2011, I was told and I was instructed and I was indoctrinated that you had to remain anonymous, that anything you said, that you did, that you practiced, you need to keep to yourself, because if anyone out there found out that you had an addiction, it was absolutely game over for you. You would be judged and criticized and mocked and maybe even pushed aside, because your weaknesses of addiction are your choice and you're choosing to ruin your life, which subsequently will ruin the lives of others. And so, of course, anonymity became a staple and a commonplace for individuals struggling with mental health and addiction to keep those things suppressed. And now, for the first time, beyond the Addict to Athlete program, by which we would show up as a group collectively, all wear a shirt that adorned the team name and logo. We were one team, unified, people accepted us. This was something very, very different. This was a concept of stand alone. And what I mean by that, if you think about it, meaning you're bringing something that you created, something that you produced, something with your mind, your hands, your soul, put onto paper, put onto canvas, put to music, put into sculpture, and you were putting this on public display for people to come out of the woodworks and critique your artwork, to critique your vision, to critique your creativity. Can you even imagine an individual who has some self-worth issues, some self-esteem issues, myself included, where I have this talent that I don't want to show people because I might get mocked or I might get teased or someone might not understand what my art is. And I'm going to put that out on public display and say, come one, come all, and judge me. I didn't really understand the magnitude of what the Addict to Artist program was going to produce. And I say that with a very proud heart, because what happened was way beyond my own level of comprehension. So we had quite a few entries this year, and a lot of our athletes who also subsequently had an amazing ability to display and produce and create art was absolutely phenomenal. And there was one in particular, a photo that one of our athletes produced and brought to the forefront and presented it. And so much so that when I was asking her a little bit about, if she's going to sell this, because you could offer to sell these photos, these pictures that they've created as a revenue for funding the nonprofit. She said, yeah, I am. And when I looked at the price that she'd put on there, it was less expensive than the frame that she purchased, meaning she paid more for the frame than she did put a tag on the photo. And then it hit me, the magnitude of what this truly means, right? And I say this all the time, that authentically, deep down and genuinely, we are at the core of all of us, every one of these humans walking the face of this earth, your sole purpose begins with the understanding that you are a creator. Artists are creators. And if you don't think you're a creator, you are very mistaken, because I want you to take a step back for a minute and think about everything in your world that you create. You create passion. You create anger. You create love. You create remorse. You create structure. You create money. You create life. You create all of these things, and yet you don't believe that you are? I mean, think about it. Everything that you see right now, no matter where you are, was created by something. Some of you guys are driving a car right now. Your fingers wrapped around that steering wheel. Someone said, I am sick and tired of walking. I'm going to freaking build something that I'm going to call a car. Boom. There it is. All that material that you're surrounded by came somewhere from this earth. They assembled it into these different parts and components. Boom. Now you're driving a Cybertruck, right? Just kidding. Who knows? But you get what I'm saying. Someone said, hey, I'm done sitting in the dirt. I'm going to invent and create something called a chair. It's going to revolutionize the way that we sit around and hang out. Someone said, you know what? I'm so finished of listening to this radio. Now I want moving pictures. I'm going to create something called the television. I mean, you think about it, you guys. We are all creators. Every one of you, in one way, shape, or form, are an artist. And I'll even challenge you this. Every one of you are photographers right now. You don't believe me? Go check your phone. Every one of you has access to an amazing camera on a phone. And it doesn't matter if it's a 1 pixel or a 48 pixel, if they even have that now. You are a photographer. And if you can capture a moment of time and then show someone and re-experience the time, the moment, the place that photo took hold and pulled you in to actually push the shutter button to close the frame, to create the photo, you're a creator, you're a photographer, you're an artist. And so I think we forget about that component of us. Now, in a world of addict to athlete and addict to artist, I always believed that addict to artist would be a much bigger program than addict to athlete for that simple understanding. We, at the core of us, are all creators. Some of you got so bogged down because you were bringing so much on board. You had such deep experience, deep emotion, deep empathy, that addiction took over to suppress that. And a lot of people say, well, I'm more creative when I'm using and smoking and drinking. No, you're not. You think you are, but you're not. Because it will always catch up with you and you're leaving the real emotion out. You're suppressing it by numbing it to get over what I believe is that hump of, I'm going to show this to the world. Please accept it. And so recently, I've been thinking a lot about Addict to Artist, so much so that, last month, Marissa and I, athletic director Marissa, and I attended a concert. And it's been years since I've attended a concert. And for all those that don't know who this guy is, I highly recommend searching him out. His name is Tyler Childers. He's a country kind of folk singer guy, and he came on the scene a few years ago. And he came in concert. In fact, he was supposed to come in 2020 with another amazing guy who subsequently I just saw in concert last week as a recording of this podcast, Sturgill Simpson. Tyler and Sturgill was supposed to come at the same time in the great year of 2020. And you know what happened? It got canceled. And so I was very devastated and bummed. 4 years later, Tyler's coming by himself because he's reached that status. Sturgill came, like I said, last week, and I got to see them both at separate times. But I say that to say this. As I was sitting there listening to Tyler and to Sturgill, and then, a guy named Shaky Graves. Now, if you haven't heard of the musician Shaky Graves, go listen to him. It's amazing. Shaky Graves was an opener for Tyler. The artistry, the poetry, the music. Guys, that's all art. This last weekend, as a recording of this podcast, my daughter Brooklyn and her cousin Scout were actually able to go up and see a concert by an individual named Steven Sanchez, another amazing artist. Go listen to him. These are all very different genres of music, but the artistry, the rhythm that's created from an instrument, the vocals, the part that stuck out to me about this artistry was when my daughter Brooklyn was showing me a video that she had captured of Steven Sanchez. This kid's 21 years old, came on the scene a few years ago, has a very deep genre of the 50s music, just amazing vocals. This kid wrote all of his lyrics, plays his music. He's got this little band out there, and he's capturing this time of the 50s, And the song that he's singing, he stops, and you've all experienced this if you've been to a concert, and the crowd sings his lyrics. They hit his pitches. They use his words. They use his passion because they've created it inside their hearts and given it back to the world through experiences that they've seen through their own eyes. And collectively, they're all singing his song. And it got me thinking, I did that when I was at Tyler, and I did that when I was at Sturgill. The cool thing about that is, can you imagine what it would be like before you reach that level? And you're sitting there at home and you're scribbling down some words as you're thinking about this song. You're wanting to get this emotion out on paper. You then produce that into some kind of rhythm and you put music to it. You sing it. You have the nerve to get up and record it. And then the hope as you push it out there that it's going to land on ears, and those ears receive it, and their hearts begin to beat in the same rhythm that you had while you were creating this. And then, down the road, you're singing your song. These people have come to see you. You stop singing and they carry on your words. Guys, that is the essence of connectivity. That is the beauty of artistry. That is the rhythm by which I think all of our life should be living. And I loved that. And I got thinking about how powerful that would be, how humbling that would be, to be able to stop and sit back and listen to the thousands of people that you've influenced simply by putting your art out there, being spoken and sung back to you. I was kind of blown away by that. It got me more excited to relaunch Addict II Artist, which, as a recording of this podcast here in September 22nd, 2024, is officially being relaunched. Now, just like Addict II Athlete, there are metaphors that we've used that go along with sports application that, when applied to the correct principle base, are the same principles to maintain a strong recovery, to overcome hurdles through mental health. Addict II Artist is going to be the exact same philosophy, meaning using artistry principles, foundations of which that when utilized and produced in the areas of mental health and addiction recovery, not only will create stability, communication, but a long-term dedication to your sobriety, to put yourself out there, to connect individuals with one another. And it begins with principle-based understanding. The same principles that an Olympian is going to use to become a world-class athlete are the same principles that an individual in recovery and mental health pursuits are going to use to overcome their adversities. The same thing holds true with Addict II Artist. The principles that you'll learn through application, understanding, through guidance, direction, teaching are going to be the same ones you can use to overcome addictions and to really get mental health in check. So where does it begin? I want to talk about the foundational principles of Addict II Artist and the beauty about what these things can become if you'll apply them and have your life become to be in sync and in rhythm with the authentic self. Remember, every one of you listening to this, like it or not, you're a creator. And this is one of the funniest things I thought, even when I was in school, junior high, high school. You guys remember taking art class? Like, all of us had to take art class. I loved art class. But the funniest thing about art class is we were graded in art class. And the older I've gotten, the more I started to realize how stupid that is. Because art and your creation is your creation. So the art teacher is going to go peel back a layer and be like, so your composite of a bowl of fruit doesn't quite move my needle, so I'm giving you a C-. And the guy next to you is like, you've really captured the detail and the dimples of that orange. I'm going to give you a B+. How can you get graded in art? It's kind of a funny thing, right? Because art is in the eye of the beholder, which means it's your creation. You created it. Who's someone to come up and say, the structure of that bowl of fruit is completely off kilter. I give it a fail. You can't do that. Because someone else is going to look at it and be like, the person that created that produced that saw it from their eyes, that transmitted that brain, message into those hand movements that created that through the pencil or brush or what have you. That's their interpretation of it. That's why art is such an amazing thing when you think of it. Anyone can do this. The biggest hurdle through art is your willingness to expose a hidden talent or to prep yourself for someone not seeing your vision and being okay with it. That's why I think artists are very interesting people, because they've become able to distinguish, their perception of what they believe and see as beauty, and they pay no mind to the person that doesn't get it, because someone out there on the flip side will get it. So you think about this purpose behind art and what it creates and what it does for us. The foundation and the purpose, first and foremost, remember, is to create, to just produce. And although it may look like a blank canvas to some, is going to look like a world of opportunity for someone else. I was watching a TikTok video on social media, and because I've been ready and prepared to relaunch Addict II Artist, there's been a lot of my feed's been gearing towards art, which is so much better than the stupid political stuff, let's be honest, right? And it was funny because there was some museum they were at, and there was some, looked like very big round balls of like clothing, and kind of in the middle was this shoe. It was a Chuck Taylor Converse shoe. And everyone was taking pictures of it. They were getting down and taking photos of it. And the guy filming the scene, it was like showing what was happening by all these people kind of checking out these very large balls of laundry, this one shoe, and everyone kind of being like, what does this mean, right? They're all. It was the funniest thing. He pans down, and it's his shoe that he took off and sit next to it, just kind of as a, you want to see, anything can be art. Now, the goal there was to mock and to make fun and to be silly, but it was art to someone. Those people that got down and took those photos, it doesn't matter whose shoe it was, they saw the beauty in the creation of that shoe. It was hilarious. But when you think about it, what if we were all to slow our pace down, to start absolutely seeing the art in the beauty of absolutely everything, with a clear mind, a sober mind, an open heart, an open mind, a growth mindset? Can you imagine what we would truly and authentically see? This is why I love Addict II Artist, you guys. So let me jump into some of these principles. There are fundamentals and principles of art that will reflect principles of mental health and addiction recovery. And as I go through these, I want you guys to kind of conceptualize and understand how, although these are artistry foundations and principles, they are absolutely mental health and addiction recovery principles. The 6 fundamentals of art are the rules of artistry, and they generally abide by the rule of comparing and contrasting, the shadows, all these kind of cool things. And the contribution of these together, I think, are what a powerful recovery program would look like. The understanding, the acceptance, and the pursuit of mental health stability. And the first one, through these interactions and these intersections and these elements, that will become a living, breathing mechanism of, I think, recovery for you, starts with anatomy. I want you to think about this for a minute, right? Understanding anatomy is essential whenever drawing humans or animals or plants, being able to describe them through written word, being able to sing about them, to create about them, being able to discern how the human body works, the proportions, the joints, the mechanisms. It's going to help you illustrate or to sculpt or to animate or to speak about the realistic parts that make us, to a sense, you might have heard this poetry in motion, right? We've heard movement equals healing. To understand the anatomy of what's going on. Think about that. To understand the anatomy of the addiction, to understand the anatomy of the mental health concern. When you start breaking down all these things, you start understanding that each part is responsible for movement of another part. Same goes for the understanding of an animal or a flower or whatever it is that you're bringing in. When you want to create art that includes something living, something being, understanding the anatomy of it is super important. Now look at that in the concepts of addiction recovery. Understanding how things move, how your addiction moves, how it manifests, what makes one link and joint and composure to another domino effect. To understand the anatomy of addiction, the anatomy of a mental health issue, you can see how these things, these principles work together. The second one, which I think is a huge part of art and of recovery and mental health, perspective. See, artists use perspective to make two-dimensional images. They use this in describing certain aspects of life or love or compassion through written expression. Perspective through art and creation of sculpture. Through music. You have intense music at the beginning of something intense and calmer music in the middle. all that rhythm, the perspective that it's going to bring, it appears as though it can bring dimension into what you're building and what you're creating. Think about it. For example, perspective rules state that an object gets smaller the further you get away, right? So if you're drawing, from a perspective of maybe a musician on stage and you're in the back, that stage is going to be super small where the people in front of you are going to be a little bit bigger. And so when you look at the fundamentals of perspective, you may use, one of the following compositions. So 1 point or linear perspective, which is creating one imaginary vanishing point. Think of a road going, just to nowhere. I think of the Pony Express Trail when I'm running the Pony 50-mile ultra marathon. You can literally see this dirt road, wide where you're standing, go off into an absolute pinpoint on the horizon. That is perspective. And then there's the the atmospheric perspective. This is the objects in the background decreasing in contrast and saturation as the distance gets further away from the viewer's eyes. So something's going to be darker further away and lighter as you're closer. And so think about those two things in mental health and addiction recovery. Perspective. What's your perspective of what's happening, what's going on in that moment? Is your perspective that this road to recovery is never going to end? Look how far it is because I'm standing here in this mental, marathon, and for miles and miles, all I can see is the same road getting smaller on the horizon that I feel like I'm never going to reach. That's perspective. The atmospheric perspective, things may seem super dark on your horizon because they're super far away, but as you approach, they're going to get brighter. See, when you use genuine and real principles and apply them to life, whether it's in recovery or mental health perseverance, they always work. Let's look at another, principle for art that goes along with what we're going to be discussing as this program moves forward, and that's form and structure. Okay, the next principle. At their core, all objects comprise of a mixture of basic shapes, right? You got squares and circles and triangles. Sometimes you get these three-dimensional cubes and spheres and triangles and prisms. Now, these forms and structures help kind of a flat drawing appear to be more realistic, to have some depth into it. And I look at these kind of concepts that how often do we see things in life as just flat and boring? My recovery, this is the whole classic, everything that happens to you. Well, it is what it is. It is what it is a flat drawing. It's like, well, this is as good as it's going to get. Baloney. It could be a lot better or it could be a lot worse. It never just is. And I'm not talking about becoming a perfectionist. What I'm saying is when you have a mindset of it is what it is, there's no form, there's no structure. You're just accepting the mediocrity of the what is. And so you think about the depth that can be created in something that you think is just anchored and not moving. Look at what happens if you hoist that anchor up and you start sailing a little bit further down that river of life. Think about that for a sec. The depth that you'll be able to experience, the perspective that will change. It's like hiking a mountain, right? I remember hiking a mountain with a kid I was doing therapy with years ago when I worked at a treatment center. And as we're sitting down here in the valley, and I'm like, look, you're talking about all these things you can't see, you can't do, you can't be a part of. I said, your perspective is very skewed. This is all you see right now. All you see is this building that you're in, that you look at these walls of this structure, this home that you're in for the time being as being a prison. I said, be ready tomorrow, 4 a.m. We're going to go do something. He's like, what? I'm like, I'll show you when we get there. Literally, I picked this kid up the next day and we hike Mount Timpanogos, which is about 12,000 feet at the top. By the time we finally got up to the top of that, he's thinking, what are we doing up here? I said to him, okay, can you see the building? Can you see the program? And he's like, not really. I'm like, you see this road? You see those trees? It's about right there. I said, but now look at this perspective. Down here in the valley, all you could see was the rooms and then what was on the small window. And you saw this mountain from your window. I said, but now look, the perspective that we have up here, look how big and wide and open everything is. You're going to get to this mountain in life just like you climbed this mountain today. See, that's perspective. That's the beauty about it, to give depth, to give variety. You think of early artist sketches of animation on storyboards, that Steamboat Willie, right, with Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse. Usually they just use kind of like some very basic shapes to do some very basic movements. But then you go watch something like, Inside Out 2 or Despicable Me 15, whatever one they're on now. And you start seeing like the depth and the perspective and the advancements that have been made. It's because they've been able to conceptualize and illustrate the basic foundations of form and structure. Now, if you look at the form that your addiction has taken and you look at the form that mental health has put you in, it's about the structure of it all. It's about being able to start cutting off all the stuff that doesn't work to really turn that big block of marble into the statue of David, to give it form, to give it structure. Sometimes you have to chisel away at some of those concepts and perceptions that we have of ourselves and allow that form and that structure to come forward. There's a beautiful sculpture I've seen, I think more so just in picture, and it's of this very well-built, chiseled, like man. And in his hands, from his waist up, are these amazing pecs and these amazing triceps, these amazing shoulders, this muscle. And he himself is like chiseling his body out of this brick and this block. But below, as he's chiseling it away, is the waist down, legs, feet, and all, of a very obese person. And the principle of it is to, kind of shape your life. And it is such a beautiful visual that if you want to do this, no one can do it for you. You have to chisel yourself out of it. You have to form yourself and structure yourself. Guys and listeners, can you see how art reflects so many principles? The next concept and principle and foundation of art that I think goes along with recovery and mental health is lighting and shadow. Now, if you can even comprehend the depth by which we could go and explore this in a addiction and mental health mindset, lighting and shadowing are absolutely like top notch. Another way to make a flat object on a paper or page or screen look more realistic is to apply the concepts of lighting and shadowing. In animative forms, you think about how light can make a character look like it's moving forward or have shape to it. The eyes or whatnot. Even in like live productions, lighting is so important. We have an athlete, Steve, that talks about this. He does a lot of video, and he's an artist in and of himself through photography and through video capturing, and he has a deep understanding on how light can make those applications of presentation look so much better. Now, look at it through the mindset of addiction recovery, mental health awareness. When you put light in the dark parts of life, you start to be a little bit more exposed. You get to see more. You get to be more. You get to experience more. When you shadow the parts that you're leaving behind, that's even more important. And when you put light on shadows to expose like those hidden parts, beauty can emerge. And you think about this, the concept, the principles, light versus dark, lighting versus shadow, all this kind of stuff. Look at the very foundation of those principles in and of themselves as it pertains to mental health and addiction recovery. Look at it. The principle of it. When you have something dark in your heart, and you put light on it, you open yourself up to friends, to families, to addict to athlete, addict to artist. You then expose that darkness to light. And what happens? The dark doesn't pour out. When you open a closet in your dark room, and it's dark inside your closet, the dark doesn't spill out into your room like, oh my gosh, it's getting dark in here. Close the door. No, light goes in. That's the beauty of this, right? You've always seen that light will always overpower dark. I mean, we could go on for hours in and of that principle in and of itself. Lighting and shadowing, they create this immediate connection. It's one of the coolest things I think we can do. Another very important aspect of art is obviously color. This last fundamental is mastering color. It includes the psychology behind it. It's the traditions. There are principles inside of color. Things like hue, right? Hue is where the shade on the color wheel that can kind of help overwrite and blend into that theme of artwork. Saturation, the level of intensity, the vibrance, the richness that color has. The value, right? Value refers to light or dark of a color that kind of indicates how much light it absorbs or reflects. The cool part about that in and of itself are the thousands of directions we can take that in mental health and addiction recovery, right? To regain color. You've heard this. When people use substances, when they're struggling with mental health, they look pale, they look down, they look sick. People often say, "Oh, you look sick." Well, when you start living life of sobriety, when you start taking care of your mental health concerns, you get color back. And people say, "You look amazing, you look radiant, you look beautiful." Think about those aspects, right? And one downfall that I have is that I'm colorblind. And colorblind is kind of a funny term because I can see color. My colorblindness is very specific, but it's a hoot because I see things apparently very different than you. And I'll never understand the way you see color, but you'll never understand how I see color. So I guess my question is, who's more correct, me or you? Because, if it is what we see, isn't that kind of like the eye of the beholder again? That's a whole nother mind bender we don't need to go down. But when you think about this, how do you bring color into music, right? By pitch, by rhythm, by instrument. How do you bring color into sculpture, right? You utilize all of these components of depth and of perception, and I love it. Think about this. I guess we weren't over. There is a few more of these principles I want to talk about. I forgot about composition. Composition is how you arrange and combine different elements to your artwork, including lines and shapes and colors and values and space and structures and textures and rhythm and music and instruments. There's so many aspects to composition. You've heard of things like, we have the rule of thirds in addiction. You have the rule of thirds in art. Simplification, meaning sometimes less is more. The rule of odds. There's so many of these principles we're going to be able to utilize in showing and demonstrating your talents at the same time building your recovery and developing an understanding of mental health issues. And so when you're pursuing a hobby or even career in art, knowing the fundamentals of art and how they apply are going to increase and enhance everything that you create. And it's a skill-based mastery, meaning none of us are going to walk in here become master artisans, just like no one walks in becoming a master of your recovery. It's some process that takes place. This is why I'm excited to relaunch this program. And we're going to be doing all kinds of things through music. I've toyed with the idea of bringing in a individual who is a choir director to have what I might think of, that I've never heard of, but a choir of individuals in recovery to not just, sing and create your recovery, but to be able to share that message with people that hope is right around the corner, that hope is as open to you as it is for the individuals that are, singing these praises of sobriety and recovery. I've thought about, again, sculpting and, digital art, all kinds of things, photography, one of the easiest things that we all can do. All you have to do is have the courage to show up. And just like me, I'm sure that a lot of you will think I'm not an artist. Just like everyone that has walked into these rooms of Addict Athlete said, well, I'm not an athlete. You become it. Think about the foundations of what Addict II Athlete, Addict II Artist revolves around. It is the Roman numeral 2, I. Now, what it basically, again, boils down to for anyone that needs a reminder is that the Roman numeral system does not identify 0. So, that being said, if you're 1 and you add something to it, that gives you the foundation, those 2 pillars, those 2 columns that you can place next to each other to build on. So even if you don't believe it, become it. Build on it. Addict II Artist is going to be an amazing program. And now that I'm taking the reins of it and going to get very passionate about it because I think it's time, I'm not saying Addict to Artist or Addict to Athlete is going away. It's not. But it's time now to introduce the components of what all of us have to offer, to be willing to show up, to show the world who you are, what you're dealing with, and to utilize these principles and more as we move forward and more. These are just the foundations. There's so many more in your own recovery, in your own pursuit of mental health. Now, I got real passionate about this. The reason why I wanted to do this by myself, because I needed to get all my ideas out. And trust me, this is just the beginning. If I find that there's a lot of individuals that want more, we may do a little spin-off and do some more podcasting with Addict to Artist. Might bring in some artists onto a different platform to create the Addict to Artist podcast. I don't know. We're pushing 500 episodes of this one finally. But Addict to Athlete is not going away. This is an addition to, not a subtraction of. But tonight, again, this is Monday, September 22nd, the year of our Lord 2024. We are going to relaunch the Addict to Artist program. Going to be live streaming this tonight so that you guys will be able to watch and be part of it as we lay the foundations to begin a new chapter of addiction recovery, but also to start producing and start creating, because I truly believe that all of us, again, have that aspect of creativity in our system, that we are in essential to the other aspects of who we become. We are creators at the core. I need you not to forget that. So that being said, jump on Addict to Athlete social media. We got Facebook. We got all these other things. Soon we're launching circles. Stay tuned for that, because that is going to be a huge connector to people all over the world. And I'm excited to get that thing going. It should be within the next few days that we'll be able to start adding people to circles, where Addict to Artist will have its own arm within this little social media, connectivity type network. And we'll be able to start producing and showing everybody what we're doing. That being said, athletes, artists, everyone in between, I hope this has inspired you to maybe test the waters, come out and check it out. Remember who you authentically are. And as always, do your best to turn your mess of addiction and mental health into your message of hope and recovery. Hello, listeners. I want to thank you all so much for listening to the Addict to Athlete podcast. I'd like to jump on here quickly and say, if you have a passion for helping individuals, if you have a community that is in need of something like Addict to Athlete, I invite you to jump on to addicttoathlete.org. Check out our recovery coach training program. Become a certified Addict to Athlete recovery coach. This will allow you to open a chapter of Addict to Athlete in your community to be able to help individuals overcome addiction by turning their mess of addiction into their message of recovery. We teach you the principles, the aspects, the scope of practice, everything you'll need to have an understanding on how you can help your community overcome addiction, to help them erase it and replace it with so much more that life has to offer. Again, being part of the Addict to Athlete nonprofit program is a beautiful aspect of recovery, helps everybody come out of their shells to be able to understand that movement equals healing, and motivation for change is one starting line away.